Good morning. Let there be light. Ha. Fiat luce. Oh, Lord. Hi. Sunday the 8th of August 2021, and I'm in London Colney in Hertfordshire, where hurricanes hardly ever happen. The chicken is on, and it's in a plastic bag. What kind of plastic is that? It doesn't burn. Clever plastic. I've never done one of them. Isn't that clever? It says leave the thing just in whole, like that, in its bag. And then you cut the bag open and give it a little roast at the end. Aha! God is alive. Well, why is it that it's acceptable for the West, America, the sort of headline news at the moment, international news, is Afghanistan's going belly up because the Americans have pulled out. But why is it acceptable that long-range bombers hit somewhere hard? And we just take it for granted. It's presumably that means people die indiscriminately. And it's just all taken for granted in the West. Well, it's all very well, God is love, but how about people showing a bit of love? Why is it just acceptable? I used to sleep in the porch of the cathedral at Abbey Church of St. Albans and spent an awful lot of time there, in fact, back in the 90s, eventually avoiding becoming a priest through the Church of England, because the Queen is the Supreme Governor, but she's also the head of the army, you see. This is just evil. So that penny finally dropped, and it was the 100th anniversary of Armistice Day, November the 11th hour, and all of that. And they had a huge, great big sort of son et lumiere inside the cathedral, so they had to move all the chairs and light the place up. And there were just streams and streams and streams of people, very well dressed, middle class, largely white bunnies. As my parents, my mother thought Churchill was the bee's knees. And yet people purport to be Christian. And all the while the killing continues. Well, yes, I believe God will intervene, in fact, at the end times, actually, as it happens. And until then, we're going to go on living in our mess, saying one thing and doing exactly the opposite. Every single hair on the head of your fellow man, woman, and child is precious and special. If they strike you on one cheek, turn unto them the other cheek. And if anyone doesn't know that, who purports to be a Christian, well, they're rather missing out. And where is that? In evidence, in the behaviour of the West, the Second War in Iraq, particularly for me, because it was so obviously clear that it was about oil, money, the West keeping control of the Middle Eastern oil, because Saddam Hussein had these 300,000 battle-hardened troops having been fighting against Persia, Iran, in that war for whatever it was, 8 years or something. And there they were, skilled, practiced fighters, and the old Saudis as soft as butter, with all their oil wealth. Absolutely no match for Saddam Hussein. And if he took Kuwait, he might then have wandered into Iraq and taken that as well. Saudi Arabia, I meant, beg your pardon. He might have wandered into Saudi Arabia, and then that's 16% of the world's oil comes from there. So West couldn't have that. Oh, so we'll just go for a bit of indiscriminate bombing, targeted bombing, whatever. Innocent, individual human beings died. Well, what do you expect God to do in those circumstances? Actually, he can do anything. Christ says, if you ask God anything in faith, you can move a mountain, no less. So, in fact, God could do something about it. But he, seemingly for the present, allows us human beings to get on with it and behave utterly appallingly. So don't blame God for the suffering. It's us, human beings, who've been given purportedly free will. But I revert to Psalm 139, verse 16. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be, which rather means, quite frankly, that actually even the most appalling acts are sort of somehow ordained by God. And then that gets difficult. Especially for me, I knew the 3 doctors in Paris who started Médecins Sans Frontières, the Doctors Without Borders. Well, I didn't really know them, but I was engaged to a girl, a nurse, French, lovely girl, very upmarket, who knew them. I used to just ring her up and say, we've got a war disaster on the other side of the planet somewhere. She'd pack everything and go. Very stressful. She stopped now. She got into aluminium. Usinor is the French aluminium people. Why should us medics, I have a medical background, why should us medics heal people that the blasted politicians have sold arms to and kill each other? Well, God has given us the opportunity to get on with it, I suppose. So an awful lot of the world's suffering is actually man-made, is the point I'm driving at here. It's not God making these things happen. But no, I'd physically held a small child in my arms, a little black boy, in a town called Middelburg. So that it's a crossing road for the big main highways in South Africa, and is just that, a town, a burg, in the middle, basically. There's a bit of original naming. So the lorry drivers come through with the money, and the local girls make themselves available. And lo and behold, that spreads AIDS. What a surprise. So why does this poor little child have to live an ignominious little life, unwanted, apparently locked away in a cupboard? So someone must have fed him, because he made it to 2 years old. We found his birth papers, christened him Luke. You see, Luke, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Luke being the healer, physician. I used to carry him in my arms about the room. Ooh. He had no language. 2-year-old. No one had ever socialised him. So he'd been stuck in a cupboard somewhere. And he went, ma. What had he done to deserve that life? The best answer I've had, I'm afraid, it's no answer in a sense, but perhaps it is their little souls go straight to heaven. That sort of thing is going on around the world now all the time. I think it's still pretty much somewhere in the region of 2 babies are born every second and a baby dies every 2 seconds, so a ratio of 1 to 4. Now, no, it's slower than that actually. I do Mississippi's. Mississippi 1, Mississippi 2, Mississippi 3, Mississippi 4. That's 2 babies just born. 8 babies just born and 2 died in 4 seconds. It is part of the human condition. I mean, there was CND, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, so people did protest massively back in the 60s when nuclear weapons came in, but it's now just sort of accepted as the way the world is, this nuclear umbrella idea. So MAD, mutually assured destruction. So the idea, obviously, if the Russians and the Chinese and the Americans have got the nuclear weapon, well, they're never going to use it because the other lot would use theirs, and then off we go. And I mean, there's nothing I can do about that, quite frankly. Well, you see, I am a Christian. So all of this is completely under God's authority. Ultimately, everything, every deed, great and small. So at the end of Ecclesiastes, it says this. I just don't have my Bible here immediately, so I can't quote properly, but that our duty of mankind, people, is to love and fear God and obey his commandments. It's pretty much that at the end of Ecclesiastes, the conclusion of the matter. And then I think it was a saint who, God give me the wisdom to know those things which I can change, and the grace to recognize those I can't and leave them to God, which can sort of mean to me, quite frankly, you've almost just got to leave it all to God, quite frankly. What can I do, me, myself? At least I can see that what's wrong. It doesn't take a genius to work this out. Don't kill. Don't manufacture and sell arms. I mean, my sort of little tongue-in-cheek thing is, I mean, if I were to be Prime Minister, of course, it's a total impossibility. I mean, no way would I get in for all that back scratching. I'm far too honest. And I'd close down the arms wing of British Aerospace. Brilliant. Going to be popular with that one, aren't I? All those jobs, all the taxes. I'd disband the armies. Even more popular now. At the end of Revelation, there's this wonderful scenario which is going to happen, the river of the water of the tree of life, when Christ, the Lamb, comes again. And the crops will bear their fruit 12 times a year, and there'll be no need of sun because God's light will be shining. Amen. I found a rose. I wonder if it'll open in the warm.